Despite wrapping up many mysteries in the back half of Season 2, the series finale of Gravity Falls dropped a major bombshell that only raised more questions. The revelation that Bill Cipher destroyed his home dimension and everyone in it, leaving him as the sole survivor. Something he regards as an act of liberation. But why? The details were kept under wraps for the next 8 years until the release of the Book of Bill. Thanks to the book and the bonus content accompanying it, we've learned so much more about Bill's home dimension and its untimely demise at Bill's hands. Did Cipher intend to wipe his people off the map? Was it a freak accident? Or is the truth somewhere in the middle? We're going to run through everything we know about Euclydia, speculate a bit on Bill's father Euclid, and try to fill in the gaps of the infamous Euclidean Massacre. You thought Bill Cipher was evil before? Well, prepare to see him in a whole new light as we unpack his inner darkness. Real quick, I just wanted to plug my new compilation and bonus channel, Roundtable Rewind, where I'll be posting old videos re-edited into theme packages that you can throw on while sleeping, studying, drawing, or just doing chores. It's a great way for videos to get a second chance at life in this ever-changing algorithm, so I hope you subscribe and check it out. Thank you so much for your continued support. Now let's talk about our favorite dream Dorito. First things first, what was Euclydia? Well, thought to be inspired by the book Flatland, A Romance of Many Dimensions, Bill describes it as a world that our 3D minds are incapable of processing as it's limited to only 2 dimensions. Completely flat, with its inhabitants constantly bumping around into each other, which I imagine looked like a more chaotic version of the bouncing DVD screensaver. Or, as I said in my video on Scalene and Euclid Cipher, it could have looked like the game Perfection, which is featured on thisisnotawebsite.com. Bill claims the only way we could perceive this dimension is by chugging expired milk while looking at a kaleidoscope, which is actually very helpful in painting a picture, as traditional kaleidoscopes are limited to 2-dimensional images. So take something like this and add a bunch of shapes? Judging by Bill's baby photo and the existence of things like oxygen, I imagine that despite being flat, Euclydia might not have been all that different from Earth. They had nature and civilization and, I don't know, bottomless mimosas, which explains why Bill is so personable compared to the other oddities the Pines encountered. His life experience was oddly comparable to that of a human's. The inhabitants of Euclydia were known as Euclideans, which were all 2-dimensional shapes like Bill, with limbs, fancy hats, and all. Also, their blood is TV static, which means Bill's current cracked state is actually exposing his equivalent of internal organs. His actual organs, not the physical form he had on Earth, where he generated layers of bone and tissue, both being pretty disturbing in their own way. The most notable thing about Euclideans, however, is that since they couldn't perceive the 3rd dimension, they also couldn't see up, only seeing from the left to the right, and it's speculated that because of this, their eyes are on the sides of their bodies like in Flatland. The only Euclidean who could see beyond the 2nd dimension was the one and only Bill Cipher, as he was born with a mutation that allowed him to perceive the 3rd dimension. This mutation is speculated to be the placement of his eye, as it's in the center of his face instead of on his side. However, I'd argue that Bill's ability to perceive the 3rd dimension wasn't just a one-off mutation, but also a major step of evolution for the Euclidean race. We know from the Theraprism's art therapy notes that Euclid and Scalene were red and blue triangles, as those are the only 2 things that Bill will draw. Red and blue, or cyan, being the 2 colors used for anaglyph 3D. You know, like 3D glasses. Personally, I find it hard to believe that this is a coincidence, especially as 3D glasses are one of Bill's listed phobias, which might also indicate that some Euclideans may have specific abilities depending on their color. But also, we don't know if Bill was the only yellow Euclidean. Red, blue, and yellow are the 3 primary colors, which might indicate that Bill, Scalene, and Euclid are of high status on Euclydia, as I believe the Cipher family was actually royalty, the rulers of this dimension, wielding unfathomable power. We know that Bill's mutation isn't the only standout thing about him. Dude is absolutely cracked when it comes to his powers. And neither the book nor the series itself gives us an idea if these powers are something Bill acquired or something outside of Euclydia, or if he inherited them from his parents. But I'd wager that it might be the latter, given his father's name. After my video on Bill's parents, where I suggested that Euclid sharing the name of the dimension and its inhabitants may allude to him being a king, like how King Vegeta in Dragon Ball is the ruler of planet Vegeta and the Saiyans, I had a ton of people bring to my attention mention that Euclid is also the name of the Greek mathematician, the father of geometry, who established the foundation of geometry in a mathematical system that's now referred to as Euclidean geometry. Sharing the name of geometry's real-life creator and having a son with some truly nightmarish feats definitely makes me think that Euclid himself was a big deal. But if Euclid was the king and Bill was the prince, then the fact that Bill killed everyone is all the more appalling. But why did Bill do it? Well, I believe it's a mix of what he tells us in the Book of Bill and resentment for the world around him. Bill claims that he was adored by the masses since the day he was born, and while that would make sense if he was royalty, I think it's also just as likely that Bill was looked down upon by other Euclideans for both his mutation and his gift. Bill is drawn to other anomalies and, in his own words, freaks, those who are outcasts in their home world. You know, like Ford and his 6 fingers. And I think that's because Bill himself was actually an outcast. His parents sung a lullaby comforting him for sporting a strange eye, which infers that this was something he was insecure about. And I can imagine that, like Ford, Bill was teased for his deformity.
Haha, your eye's in the center of your face.
Not only that, but if he's constantly yapping about a third dimension that no one else can see, he's gonna sound a little cuckoo. You know, like how the early episodes of the show would have Dipper fixate on the supernatural, and he'd be trying to prove himself to the adults around him, only to get shut down and ridiculed, including by people like Stan, who knew Dipper was telling the truth about everything the entire time. I think that potential ridicule for his claims of a third dimension and his mutated eye really got under Bill's skin. It's why he insists that he doesn't need anyone, even though most of his schemes does require at least one other person shaking his hand. And it's why he said everyone in Euclidia had flat minds and flat dreams. He's clearly bitter about them, despite claiming that everyone loved him. Euclideans were content in the second dimension and had no desire to see what lied ahead. They didn't even believe something else could be out there. They couldn't look up and see the stars. So, Bill devised a plan to liberate his home dimension, believing everyone would be grateful for it.
It was time to put on a show. I came up with a plan to show everyone what they were missing. Their screams getting louder and louder as I... So much blood! So much! Mandible! My hands shaking as I realized I could never undo the... Was the last one breathing? Episodes of Family Matter! Until there was no one left but me, covered in blood, alone in the universe. Huh, that's weird. For some reason, whenever I try to talk about that day, there's this loud buzzing in my ears and I black out for 30 seconds. Well, we can come back to it. The important thing is, I'd freed myself from my suffocating world and freed everyone else too. And everyone loved me for it, and everyone was fine. And that's all there is to say about that. The new dimension I escaped to had a job vacancy for the role of Galactic Overlord. I humbly obliged.
So clearly, Bill's lying when he says that he freed everyone and that they loved it and everyone was fine. In reality, whatever he did killed every single Euclidean in his dimension, including his parents. Fleeing to the Nightmare Realm in the aftermath of this massacre, putting his best foot forward to bury the past from here on out, always making a conscious effort to break any and all rules after feeling restricted by the loss of his homeworld. Now, although Bill blocked out the details of this fateful day, and it's purposely left ambiguous on if Bill intended on killing everyone or if it was a mistake, additional context clues from thisisnotawebsite.com leads me to believe that it was a little bit of both. Entering NAITSUAF into the terminal will bring up a soul contract with Bill. Signing it will change the color of the candle's flame from orange to blue, which in the context of Gravity Falls, we recognize as the color of Bill's fire. After this shift in hue, hitting the computer knob will play a backwards message from the same text-to-speech voice that appears when you type in Valles Cineres, aka Valley of Ashes. But this time, instead of someone asking, "Why did you do it?" the audio clips say, If Bill has one signature ability, it's definitely his pyrokinesis. Fire always pops up when he strikes a deal. It pops up when he gets mad. He burned the journals. He set all of Gravity Falls ablaze when he started Weirdmageddon. Dude loves fire! And judging by that backwards message, he somehow lit the whole sky on fire in an attempt to show everyone the third dimension. It seems like Bill was literally trying to break the sky with his pyrokinesis, as if blasting full force would cause it to shatter and somehow cause the world to expand into 3 dimensions. But instead, his attack set the atmosphere ablaze, causing everything to burst into flames, if not igniting one big explosion. However, I don't think this would explain why Bill is the only survivor. Like, you're telling me no one else evaded the flames and tried to escape? Not to mention, this whole story leaves out one pretty big and consistent piece of his character: his temper. We know that when Bill is agitated, he's quick to hit him with the old tweak and transform, going on an absolute rampage until he's either defeated, stalled, or runs out of steam. So although it's too vague to say this was 100% the case, I could totally see Bill freaking out when everything's catching on fire, and instead of being met with validation and praise, he just sees everyone screaming at the top of their lungs as they try to avoid the flames of disaster. Seeing his plans go horribly wrong and being powerless to stop the fire, Bill probably recognized that his life was over and he'd be severely punished for his actions. Unless he kills everyone. So he snapped and decided to finish the job started by his arson, assuming his grotesque pyramid form and slaughtering every Euclidean in sight to avoid punishment. Even his own parents, who were probably his one ticket out of life in prison if he didn't go off the deep end. I know this sounds crazy, but one of the few words you can make out on this page seems to read, "nice to me." Although it could potentially say something like, "nice to meet you," but nice to me gives me the vibes of when someone's just taken out everyone in their path. But maybe they'll spare the one person who was always nice to them. If Bill was bullied for his eye and claims of a third dimension, then I'd totally buy that he'd consider sparing one of the few peers who didn't make fun of his appearance or beliefs, only to still go through with it because fuck it, no survivors. All of this was way too much for him to process though. He couldn't come to terms with the blood on his hands, the lives he took both by accident and with intent. So he went on the lam and laid low in the Nightmare Realm, having the occasional run-in with Time Baby, which is a saga that's worth its own video, so make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss out on that one. Although he acts like he's above attachments and never regrets any of his actions, the Book of Bill makes it very obvious that Bill despises himself for eradicating his homeworld and is still holding on to what remains of his old life. It's not only implied that he tried to strike a deal with Time Baby in order to go back to the past and stop himself from destroying Euclydia, but it's revealed that he's in possession of the dimension's last atoms. One of the Lost Journal 3 pages included in the book features an instance where Ford caught one of Stan's scams on TV. A voice from the past. "I was adjusting my TV antenna for weather reports, looking for ideal conditions for Fiddleford's first portal test, and spat out my coffee when I saw this. My brother hawking scams under the name Panley Steins. I had half a mind to call that number just to pretend to be the police, and maybe scare Stanley straight for once. There is something so galling about seeing your own face committing crimes on your own TV. When my muse saw me break out my stress ball, I decided it was finally time to vent about Stanley."
How about that? You've got an inferior clone. Why didn't you just eat him in the womb? Think of how powerful you'd be.
Yeah, this guy definitely killed everyone. You can't just eat your own twin, Bill.
You'd be surprised what you can eat.
Yeah, he definitely ate people.
I say sure. Call him if you want him to start mooching off you again. Me, I went no contact with my home dimension, and I don't regret it. All they did was hold me back and sabotage my talents. Can you imagine?
More than you know. But do you ever wonder if maybe things could have been different?
Take it from a guy who tried. You can't undo the past, unless you want to thaw a giant baby out of a glacier.
Come again?
Figure of speech. It means waste your time.
I guess you can never really go home again, can you?
I sure can't. My dimension was entirely burned out of existence. Want to see the only thing left of it?
Cipher removed his hat and plucked out a single speck of dust from within. The last atoms of a demolished reality. I was dumbfounded. What? Your entire home dimension? Destroyed? How? By what? Bill looked distant. More distant than I'd ever seen him.
By a monster.
That's unimaginable! Did you ever track this beast for revenge? I could help you! I could hunt it down! He laughed joylessly.
Sixer, it would eat you alive.
Yeah, Ford might have destroyed those atoms when he fumbled his shot on Bill in Weirdmageddon Part 1. While it's still ambiguous, I do think this dialogue leads into the idea that the destruction of Euclydia wasn't just an accident, especially with Bill saying that the monster would eat Ford alive, implying that he would attack Ford should he ever find out about Bill's secret and try to avenge the Euclidean race. Bill's story, like many in Gravity Falls, feels like a cautionary tale of self-sabotage. What happens when you push those around you away while also being beaten down by the world around you? What happens when your pride and ego gets the better of you as you desperately try to seek validation, even if it runs the risk of hurting those around you? Bill rolled the dice, and unfortunately, it blew up in his face. And instead of owning up to his mistakes and atoning for his past, he doubles down and relishes in being a monster, even if it makes him sick to his stomach deep down. He'd rather become his worst nightmare instead of being vulnerable and taking accountability for his actions. And look where that got him! Stuck in rehab! But there you have it, everything we know about the Euclidean Massacre. What do you think really happened? Do you think Bill will ever come to terms with the truth? Let me know in the comments down below, and keep the conversation going over on Twitter and Instagram at OstricVox and at Roundtable Vids. Shout out to JANKYBONES for an amazing thumbnail. Seriously, dude is always cooking up some top tier art. Give them a follow on Twitter at JANKYBONE, and if you need a new addition to your fall wardrobe, check out Toondrip for some dope cartoon inspired merch. Links to everything in the description. If you enjoyed this video, please sort of like and subscribe to the Roundtable for more great cartoon content. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have an awesome day. OstricVox, signing out. Peace.